So, welcome to yet another wonderful edition of Thinkly Talks, a place where we are in conversations and dialogues with some amazing people from around the world. So, we're back today in Jasprit's community, PlurAlity Dialogues. Jasprit, welcome to you again.
Thanks, Vivek. It's been a while. Great to be back. Thank you.
And good to
I
see
was
that you've
actually battling some viruses, not of the computer kind, the original ones.
No. Good to see you back, absolutely. So Jasprit, we, as usual, have a very interesting topic for today, the rise of generative robots. And I think it's going to be very interesting to kind of unpack this one because it kind of, in some ways, lays to rest the whole thing around the Moravec's paradox, right? And you kind of start wondering whether we've now finally turned the corner on that one. But I think before we do that, let's just double down and do a quick recap of the things that happened over the last 2 weeks in AI. Last week we went there because of Holi, so allow me to just share the screen. So I think, Jasprit, I think you've also kind of tweeted that nothing ever happens without Sam and Microsoft getting involved. The moment we talk about AI nowadays, right? And I think this is one such week again, or one such, let's say, fortnight again, where what you really saw on display was a fantastic, should I say, game of 4D chess all over again. Satya Nadella playing pretty much in God mode, right? When suddenly, there was an announcement saying that, Mustafa Suleiman, a renowned person in the whole AI world, the co-founder of, DeepMind, which was bought over by Google, and then the co-founder of Inflection, where I think he's raised close to $1.5 billion, So he has actually been snapped up by Microsoft and is going to head their, the consumer AI initiative, right? There are a lot of things to be kind of, to be read between the lines, but, first your perspective, Jasprit, about this.
No, Vivek, you're absolutely right. Satya Nadella is showing himself to be a master strategist and tactician also.
Yeah.
And, we saw some of that during the whole OpenAI debacle that happened earlier or late last year. But in this case, it's very interesting. And, it would be interesting to know how long this has been brewing. Because Microsoft has been the largest investor, I think, in Inflection so far. And then if you look at the companies, the startups in the space, the ones which have become unicorn scaled up, I think are really four. There's obviously OpenAI, okay, and then there was Inflection, and there's Anthropic, and now there's Mistral. These are the four big ones in that sense. There's also Stability, which is going through its own instability right now. But the other four, and I think with this, what he's done is that of the lot, it can also be argued that Inflection was not doing the best. Claude has made its mark. OpenAI, obviously, Mistral has made its mark. But Pi, which Suleiman and Inflection brought out with, was not really, up there with the other three. And so I think he's kind of eliminated one so as to have less competition. Okay, for not only for the consumer, but also for GPUs. And gotten in some great talent, obviously. And most importantly, in my opinion, built a hedge against something happening again at OpenAI. One of my predictions this year, I write 10 predictions every year. And later this week, we'll have the quarterly update of those predictions. Was that either OpenAI and Microsoft will get married or get divorced. Okay. And I think this is a hedge against a possible divorce.
Yeah. So I don't know whether you came across the leaked emails about Satya writing to his investors or the board members, They said, look, don't worry about OpenAI. We are below them. We are above them. We're alongside them. The IPs are, So you can see that, obviously the board and obviously Satya Nadella, with the kind of investment that they've done and the kind of hedge that they've taken, really with them, they would be a worried lot, right? But do you think, Jasprit, that this, people have been speculating that the acquisition has been of the talent, and I think a lot of the team, not the company. So there are speculation that this whole acqui-hire approach is to kind of avoid any, antitrust issues, because anybody would argue right now they by far are the dominant force in AI. Right? Any thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. Well, one, it was a cheaper way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, buying the entire company, which at a few $1 billion valuation would have been more expensive.
Right.
Second, absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head that it is it's to avoid antitrust. The regulators aren't going to be very happy by this devious play in a sense. But I think, yeah, that's the whole 4D chess thing, right? Maybe we should call it 5D chess now. There's a dimension he's playing under which we don't even know.
Right.
And this is another big reason.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the legal counsel Brad Smith must be really working overtime to make this happen, right? But one last thing before we kind of move on is what do you really see this whole consumer AI thing? Because I think there was a little bit of, again, I think 19-20 ka issue between the way Satya Nadella put it across and the way Mustafa talked about it. Do you see any conflict about what exactly would entail when you talk about consumer AI? Because obviously they're talking about Copilot, Bing, and everything, and then people say then what's really left out apart from enterprise? But that's also covered in this in some ways.
I look, both of us have been at Microsoft, so we know there's always ambiguity. Okay,
Right.
and so I'm sure there's some organizational ambiguity. I think the enterprise AI in many ways is subsumed by the cloud in many
Right.
ways, right?
That's right.
So I don't see an enterprise AI division in that sense because I think that will be a part of it will be subsumed by the cloud. But yes, there was some controversy, but very frankly, I think too far away from the organization to,
Right.
and I don't know
Yeah.
enough of the gossip inside to know what's really happening.
Right. Right. But I think you nailed one point very well, that this is a hedge against Sam. And, as usual, we are in a meme world, and there was this fantastic meme going around saying this is what Sam's reaction was when he heard about the acquisition, saying, okay, now how the hell did this happen, right? But then, we talked about Satya playing 5D chess right now, right? And just when you would think that, Sam might probably start getting worried or plotting something, this is what Satya Nadella dropped again. And this was really about the fact that $100 billion commitment or at least plans to kind of invest, along with OpenAI to set up really a vast data center and especially also the supercomputer that they're calling Stargate. So some thoughts about that.
But first of all, I love the name Stargate.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's good, ambitious. It's not called supercomputer version 3.26 enterprise or something like that. Okay, which is what has started really happening with companies like Microsoft. Now Google does that very well. This has a couple of things here. So one is that it actually still shows that the newer models are being built by throwing more compute at the model, rather than only doing other things. I'm sure they're doing other tweaks also. Right. But in many ways, I guess both the companies have realized that to move to the next level, you have to throw far bigger compute, okay, at this model. And that's what Stargate is doing. In fact, some reports I've read say that it's not 100 is the minimum. It's going to be more like 115, 120, which, by the way, is more than 2 times Microsoft's annual R&D budget. And Microsoft has a fairly hefty $50 billion budget. So it's a huge, huge commitment. The other thing that I see here is how this plays out vis-a-vis NVIDIA. Okay, because, will this 150 billion or whatever $billion supercomputer be formed of NVIDIA GPUs? Or will it be the new Microsoft Maya, servers, GPUs that they've been talking about? And I would kind of bet that it will be on the latter, because they do want to. I think it's also a play. So the first one was a hedge against OpenAI. I think this is a bit of a hedge against NVIDIA. Another interesting report which came out, Frank, also was that one of the things they're talking about is whether the cables connecting the servers would be NVIDIA's cables or not. I believe NVIDIA also designs and manufactures those cables and then self-cost a bomb. So I think they're kind of looking at this, one, to bear out this big compute thing, and second, as a bit of a hedge against NVIDIA. And look, at the end of it, it's also shock and awe tactics, right?
Right.
You're kind of throwing out something so that the competition sits up, and people have already been predicting a $300 billion supercomputer coming from Google or whatever. But that's how I see this.
We are in for some insane amount of investments happening in this space. I mean, whether the 300 billion happens or not, or the 100 billion, I mean, the sheer scale is something else, right?
I've written about the fact that 300 billion Googles and Amazon will say, I want to do 500 billion, and Elon Musk is going to talk about a $1 trillion giga computer.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as Elon is around, things are always interesting, right? And I think that brings us to the buy note, the foot line about a small, $2.5 billion investment in Anthropic, right? I mean, the scale is so different right now. But yeah, I mean, how exactly do you think Anthropic is doing right now with Amazon doubling down? And I think it's finally made a $4 billion, owns majority of the company, I believe. And yeah.
See, in the proprietary LLM space, I think it's GPT and Google and Claude. Okay,
Yeah.
GPT, Gemini, Claude. So I think that threesome is kind of getting set now. And Claude is obviously from Anthropic. And then obviously there's open source with Mistral and Meta's Llama, etc., which is a separate deal. But I think, if you go back, even Michael Porter, etc., used to talk about these rule of threes that eventually, like it happened with three cloud providers, it's eventually three people. And therefore, I think Amazon and Google also, by the way, has invested in Anthropic. And they kind of have realized that this is the horse to back because OpenAI is gone and Google is Google. But the other interesting thing here is it's also a war of the cloud. Okay, and since OpenAI is wedded to Microsoft, and so Microsoft's cloud will, they'll create this cloud, this supercomputer, etc. Here, in fact, while they're investing 2.75, taking it up to a total of 4, it's still not exclusive to AWS. And Anthropic is, in fact, is at a position where it can hedge between Google Cloud and AWS, and in a sense, hold them to ransom as to where they get more investment. So I think it's kind of being played from both sides.
I think it's a game of poker and counterintelligence combined, right? I mean, each one is making its own play. You have no idea, hedging, counter hedging. I mean, this is going to make some interesting movie, I think, a few years down the line. Yeah. And just before we move along, do you see, I mean, you made a very interesting observation that, the rule of three, that there is some consolidation that eventually happens, right? Somebody will dominate 50%, then 50% of that, and so on and so forth, right? Do you see us that now, after all this huge play that have happened over, I would say, over the last 2-3 years in the foundational models, the next round of investments will probably be more focused now really on the application side, on the devices side, and then the robotic side, right? Because this play seems to be like the old OS play. Now more and more they'll start looking like each other. The compute can only take you so far, So really, do you think that will be the next big play happening?
No, I think this play will also continue. So while all those other things will happen, it's everything everywhere all at once, as the movie said. Okay, so but because in the large language model space, while it would kind of probably consolidate to 3 or 4, and then there'll be the open source guys, remember that too. Okay,
right.
But I don't think we have really solved anything yet. Okay, and I think until quote unquote AGI, I think bulk of investments are still going to go, in my opinion, on the basic models, because those models itself are at their beginning. While it might come down to that they're going into 3 of those or 4 of those, but I think a bulk of the investments will still continue going to the lower end of the stack, and especially the big tech investments. But yes, the innovation investments would start and have started moving up the stack, including going to hardware, which I think is what we are going to be chatting about. Yeah.
Right. And I think on that note, I'll just quickly move across to the topic today, generative AI. And I think just want to show one reel that's from around 2 weeks back when Figure and OpenAI announced their collaboration. So I'll just quickly play that reel. And there's one other short 30-second video I want to show after that. So.
Hey, Figure One, what do you see right now?
I see a red apple on a plate in the center of the table, a drying rack with cups and a plate, and you standing nearby with your hand on the table.
Great. Can I have something to eat?
Sure thing.
Great. Can you explain why you did what you just did while you pick up this trash?
On it. So I gave you the apple because it's the only edible item I could provide you with from the table.
Yeah. So I think a lovely clip which showed the AI really conversing. And I just wanted to show this other clip, maybe 10 seconds of this one. It's a from Bremen's this thing. Yeah.
Next, we have a video of the unit tree robot breaking humanoid land speed records. Imagine this thing chasing you. Next, we have a robot from Boston Dynamics, something you've probably seen already, but this one is moving heavy objects with insane precision.
Yeah, that's it. I just wanted to, I'll pause out here. So, Jasprit, I mean, we're just seeing some fantastic developments happening right now in robotics, right? I mean, at one side, you see the whole power of Gen AI. And of course, now that Gen AI is also text-to-speech, right? So you see the robot talking to you, conversing with you, pausing when he talks about why he gave you the apple in between. There's I gave you the apple because, so it was as realistic it can be. And on the other side, where typically when you've seen the problem with robots when it comes to sensory perception, about really the motor and stuff like that, suddenly it's all exploding and seeming to come together all at once. So, what's your thought? Maybe you could begin by saying that how is this generation of Gen AI robots different from what we used to call robots?
Yeah, actually, the action is moving beyond robots to a superset of hardware. Okay, so we've been so far in the generative AI space, we have been seeing a lot of action obviously happening and continuing to happen in software. Okay, creating new models, newer models, etc., etc. But over the past few months, actually, the action has moved to the hardware space. And someone said very interestingly that in this space, hardware seems to be eating the world, not software, because most of the investments are going into hardware. Even behind the large language models, most of the money is going into NVIDIA's GPUs, which is hardware, or TSMC's chips, which are hardware. And now we are seeing, these humanoids, etc. But let's kind of keep that overall hardware part aside, which we can talk about also, but talk about this. I think there's a key difference, as you yourself are hinting at, between the figure robot and the Boston Dynamics, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Boston Dynamics, robots. And the Boston Dynamics robots have been around for the longest time. YouTube videos and Twitter feeds are full of, these dancing robots, crawling robots like a dog, dogs and robots, and, things like that. But most of those robots are industrial robots. And they were, as you showed in your video itself, the lifting heavy stuff, precision, screwing in a precision way, etc. And the problem there has been very different, I think. And so, they're not humanoid as much. I think the humanoid one started happening more and more. We started seeing Sophia coming in, who incidentally is a citizen of the UAE right now. And then we saw Optimus from Tesla. Okay. And now we are seeing a Figure. Figure, by the way, I think is probably the most funded robotic company today, $2 billion, and all the big names are there. But I think the key difference between Figure and the others is that Figure is really a hardware extension to a large language model, and so, it's kind of understanding. So it's powered by its OS in a sense. I don't know too much in depth, but its OS in sense, its operating system is a large language model. Okay, and that is, I think, that exciting new direction. Okay, which has happened in humanoid robotics, and this area I think will be the fastest growth, and probably will be the way to create non-industrial, more consumer-oriented humanoid robots, the ones which were supposed to have washed our dishes and cleaned our rooms and done our shopping and taken care of our older parents and babysat our children. I think will be these new class which are coming now, as opposed to the Boston Dynamics one.
Right. In fact, I think even Elon has talked about that. He's long on Tesla, obviously because of his EVs, but he really believes that eventually, the robots that that they're building out are the ones which can probably be there with every human being, right? Everybody can potentially. I think the time of the market that he's predicting is huge. There's an interesting question here on that from Anand Sharma. He said, do you believe that eventually generative robots are capable of designing new products by themselves? And I think we've talked about self-replicating code and the new code. I mean, when we talked about it, but and that obviously is a little, what should I say, can be hurtful to the to humans. But I would imagine that robots just writing new lines of code for the way they run and walk. And I mean, we obviously again,
Yeah. I see this in an interesting construct. So I think, if you think about what mostly Microsoft is talking, they're talking of these co-pilots, right? And these co-pilots are software co-pilots, which help you write a document or solve a problem or think of something or write a novel or whatever. Probably with these, we'll probably have hardware co-pilots. I mean, literal co-pilots, like a physical co-pilot, with you, who's helping you, so you could do certain things with your software co-pilots, obviously, work and, but there are many things which you would do with a hardware, with a robotic co-pilot, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, in the industrial world, they're called cobots, okay, where, it's a cobot, as the name suggests, is human and robot, and working with each other. The robotic arm is doing the heavy lifting and the human is doing whatever, precision stuff that needs to be done. And I think similarly, so, literally each one of us could probably have a hardware robot. But coming to the question, which, sorry, I forgot who asked the question.
Anand Sharma.
Anand, I think I think creating stuff, frankly, I don't think we even need robots for that. The code itself, at the end of it, creating new stuff, a lot of it is actually the inside stuff, which is the software. Okay. And I think, you don't need a robotic person sitting and typing software, okay, to create some new program. I mean, that can happen through a software agent itself, software robot itself. And many robots actually are software. Robotic process automation, as RPA, as we know, is all software robots. They're not hardware robots. But maybe if your question was more towards, will a robot be like building a new kind of car?
Yeah.
Possibly, but that's more Elon Muskian territory, frankly. It's kind of a little far off. But what I do see possibly amongst the initial users, talking of Elon Musk, are potentially humanoid robots which are colonizing other planets, because humans can't do that. Biology prevents you from doing that. And silicon-based and silicon and metal-based object could do that.
Right. There's an interesting question here, and I think would probably help you to just come down a little, because there are a lot of people trying to figure this out. Is it that Aniket says that can anyone easily operate a generative robot, or does it require specialized training? And I think it would be good for you to articulate as to why, this whole human-machine interaction in the way we talk about is going to change.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. And who was that, please?
Aniket.
Aniket, it's a good question. See, the promise of generative AI is not just about a chatbot, okay, or about some new joke being created, or someone summarizing PDF documents, which are great, never happened before. But I think, as Gartner put it very succinctly, generative AI is not just a technology or a trend. It is a fundamental shift in how humans and machines work with each other or communicate with each other, and that's very insightful and very profound and very important, because for the first time now we are at a situation where a computer will learn your language rather than you learning the computer's language. So far we had to learn Python or C or whatever, and now prompts done well are nothing but programming, okay, or coding in some sense, okay. And so it has become natural language interfaces in many ways, the promised natural language interface, and soon it's going to move to voice being the predominant UI. And so if I was to therefore come to the robotic part of the story, I think, as we saw in the very early video which Figure brought out, which is actually Figure 1.
Right.
A very early video which Figure brought out, the guy talks the human being talks in very natural, normal language. You don't need training to do ChatGPT. I don't think you need training to work with a natural language, with a LLM or a generative AI based robot. I think that's the whole idea, that that barrier goes away.
Right. I think that's where it starts becoming really powerful, because the accessibility and everything ends up being so different.
Absolutely.
So I think the other question out here is, Arnav is asking, what are the main challenges or limitations currently facing generative robots? I mean, in your mind, I mean, they obviously have come a long way, but what is stopping them from really, getting to scale? Is it going to be the cost? Is there some other elements? And what are researchers doing to address them? Anything that you might be able to dwell upon?
It's a very, very initial area. In fact, I don't think they've come a long way. I think they've just started.
Right.
What we saw today was the first ever prototype, of a generative AI robot, at least which was demoed. Maybe there's stuff in the labs, etc. But I at least haven't seen anything. I've seen the dancing dogs of Boston Dynamics, but that's different. Uh, so, I'm so far away from being a robotics expert that I'm kind of almost, hesitant to answer because it's such an amazing field with some amazing people. So I'll keep it very general. And so the thing about hardware is that it's hard. It really is hard. Okay, it's a very hard thing to do. And that's why, despite all his eccentricities, Elon Musk needs to be really admired because he does the hard stuff. It's not just about creating a great new advertising engine or a software agent or a new chatbot. He kind of translates that into actual hard working stuff and, cars and spaceships. And if you again look at how long it took for him to put a rocket out, there were like at least 10 crashes. And even now with this big rocket, it's like on his third crash or something.
Third crash.
Like, yeah. And there'll be a couple more crashes. That's how it works, with hardware. And so I think we are at the beginning, frankly, for generative AI robots. And we're going to see a lot of failures, a whole lot of failures, before something real and usable comes along, just because hardware is a very, very, very difficult thing to do because it's not just code, there are actually things which have to move, things which don't have to fall down. Just moving our thumbs like this, twiddling our thumbs takes, I believe, some 40 or 45 muscles doing different movements. Right. Okay, and so it's just very difficult. And to make a humanoid do is going to take, that's why it's difficult to do.
Right. There are a few questions there from Meera, Varun. I'm just trying to, conflate some of them. If, they're trying to say that, how do you imagine the world to be? Like, for example, which industries you expect will get transformed? How do you think will be a day in a life of a human, who's, let's say, living a privileged life and all that, Jaspreet, I think you should probably dedicate your next article in Mint or something about, let's say, life in 2030 surrounded by all these Gen AI robots or something like that,
And soon I'll be called a futurist then.
I think if you're in AI world, I mean, you already are, right? One foot on that side. But I mean, I'm just saying, obviously, we'll obviously, all of us will go wrong. We just can't imagine. But I'm sure you've contemplated, speculated what the world would be. How would it be in 5 years from now?
There are different scenarios. Okay. So let me take the most dystopian scenario and the most utopian scenario. And
Fantastic.
hopefully somewhere in the middle. Okay. Because the most dystopian scenario, let's start with the bad news. Okay. Which is painted often by Yuval Noah Harari, among others. Okay. Is the fact that, you'll have all these humanoid robots out there and also software. Okay. And every single value producing activity that human beings do, which create value, whether it be a factory worker or whether it be a farmer or whether it be a software engineer or whether it be a nurse, which creates value, will be replaced by either software or hardware or a combination of the two. Okay, and so human beings will not have to work anymore. Now, that is not a utopian view. That's a dystopian view. It's a bad view. It's a dark view because, while it sounds amazing, and so he says that, maybe and so because these robots will be so much better than us, they'll create infinitely more or quantum more value than we do. And so all the wealth created, will actually be distributed amongst the rest of us who are doing nothing, biological life forms. And so we are sitting, as he says, the entire day playing video games. Okay, and now maybe for a few of you, this would sound very nice, but it isn't. I mean, we'll probably see a suicide rate close to 100%. Okay.
Yeah.
Because human beings need a purpose to live. And so if we kind of cede control of everything, even if we're getting money in return, money is not going to fill that void in our life,
Very true.
which is much bigger than just money. And so that's the dystopian view 30 years from now. The utopian view is that, look, we will figure out the right balance, and there'll be a lot of work which human beings are doing, which should not be done by them. Okay, dangerous, working in dangerous places, even waging war, manual scavenging, doing heavy-duty construction for skyscrapers, which is dangerous. Truck driving, by the way, I believe is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Funnily, not because of accidents, but because one side of your body gets all the sun and you get skin cancer on one side. Okay, it's crazy. Okay, crazy stuff when you kind of go into details. And so, there'll not be truck drivers and there'll be robots who'll be driving. So all these jobs, which are dangerous, will be done by humanoids and others, while jobs which are, and work, the kind of work with compassion. I mean, I still think that, while there could be a robot helper for an old person, the old person still needs a human being, okay, to take care of her also along with that. And so I think the utopian part, therefore, is that, we'll be at this stage where all of these will work with us as co-pilots, and the world will be a much, much more productive and much, much more happier place, because we won't have all the dangers, as you say. So you choose which one you like, and hopefully we'll be somewhere in the middle.
Right. And on point with that, where there are a couple of questions. Again, I'm, conflating what Lavanya and Sakshi are asking, saying that, when I did your course on AI ethics and society, right? How much at that point in time was this whole thing around robotics coming in? Because, were you also at that point in time contemplating, the whole, onslaught of these kind of things? So what kind of ethical consideration one could imagine right now when you debate these topics?
Lavanya, Sakshi, you weren't even contemplating large language models.
Yeah, you actually did that before LLMs, right?
Yeah, I started in September 21, and it was supposed to, and it ended in July, August 23. Bang in the middle, everything changed.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I think, I, for one, for example, really wanted to, if this had happened a year before, my entire 2 years would have been dedicated to understanding ethical issues around large language models, because they're just so much more and so different, okay, from pure machine learning, okay, or so I don't think we even thought of those. Forget robotics. But having said that, there is one, and one day I'm sure we're going to do a talk on this also. But the humanoid part and the ethical dimension, which we did study and people have been studying a lot, is about human-robot relationships. And by relationships I mean even romantic relationships, okay, or friendly relationships, or who knows, going forward they could be or colleague co-worker relationships, okay. And so that is a huge area, social AI, huge area of interest and research. We touched upon that a little bit, but frankly we didn't have enough time to go into even large language models, forget about robotics.
Right. No, we're just into some very interesting, what should I say, uncharted territory over and over again, right? And I think one thing that makes me think is that, when you look at, let's say, movies like, for the iRobo, when you look at the R2D2, when you look at, let's say, even Foundation, where apparently there's not a single robo in the galaxy, there's only one, I think Dermitzel, at least in the Apple's version of it, was a robo, right? And I think all of them come down to the simple, laws of robo that they have to always follow. That's apparently, so even Dermitzel cannot do certain things because, she's apparently bound by that law. iRobo, obviously, you had finally a robo which, so do you assume that eventually, I think every boot of the, booting up of a robo would possibly, invoke these kind of zero laws? And there I see regulation coming in, for example, the government wanting to kind of ensure that there's going to be any thoughts on that?
No, that's a good thought. And, again, we've talked about this, but science fiction predicts what's going to happen 30, 40 years, sometimes in advance. And when Isaac Asimov created his 3 laws of robotics, legendary laws of robotics, it was actually created for an era when these robots will be there and will actually be stronger, more powerful, maybe more intelligent than human beings. And therefore, how, these should not harm a human being. And I think a version of those three laws, obviously, we'll need to kind of, evolve them more. And also bring in some kind of a Hippocratic oath of first
Yeah.
do no harm. And, kind of create something which, not only when you boot up a robot, frankly, I think this is also going to happen for when you write a large language model. Okay. And those haven't been codified yet, and those standards aren't there yet. But the key thing which people are wanting to do is to codify this, to set up some standards so that, those become integral to building both software as well as hardware. And certainly Asimov's three laws, along with others, will play a strong role in that.
Right. So for people, I think, who are very keen on being in this area, of course, your Jensen Huan, who made a very interesting statement that if you're interested to really do computer programming, just focus on knowing good English, so that, that's how the world is moving towards. But still on that front, anybody interested in focusing on the field of AI, specifically generative robots, what do you think they should be looking at doing?
So Jensen Huang's statement, I don't think is valid for AI robots. Okay. It probably is valid for software programming, okay, at a point of time, okay, which is that you don't really need computing language, you need only natural language. And I do believe, I agree with him. I think that's the way the world is going. But I think building a robot is a different story. And we talked about how hard hardware is. And so, I think, and I think a couple of things happened in the last few years. The software guys became more glamorous than the hardware guys, and overall tech guys became more glamorous than the rest of us. Okay, I think both of that is going to change. I think humanities, languages, logic, grammar people are going to become as important, if not more, than software people. And also, hardware guys are going to actually become more important than software. Even today, I mean, I was listening to an Andre Karpathy interview, and he was saying that there are software issues, sure, but what we don't see is below the hood. The hardware problems are bigger. How 10,000 GPUs work together. Okay, how to make that happen. And I also, again, recently read that AI hardware people and chips people, semiconductor people, hardware people are twice or thrice better paid than AI software or data scientist people. Okay, and so I think that field of study is clearly going to be massive, and it's not going to be just replaced by natural language. You'll need to know engineering, and that's what you should be looking at.
Right. I think this on that point, when you talk about the talent issue and how people are differently calibrated, paid, compensated, right? There was, I think, a very interesting post that you had written about the whole fight for the talent among the big tech companies. I think the audience here would really love to hear your thoughts around that and really your observation as to what's happening.
There are three things which I think everyone is fighting over in terms of creating the next big large language model. Compute is one, and therefore NVIDIA's share price. Data is another. Okay, and therefore all the synthetic data and corporate data, etc., being fought over, Reddit, New York Times, all of that stuff. And the third, obviously, is talent. And while there are a whole lot of data scientists, whole lot of whatever, again, Andre Karpathy was saying, it's not that you just give a guy saying, I'm giving you unlimited GPUs to create a large language model. Not going to happen. According to many people, there are less than 100 people in the world, who can actually, given the right resources, create a world-class large language model, which has world-class hallucination or whatever parameters and energy parameters and precision parameters. They say less than 100. And each of them are paid in millions of dollars and guarded by thick, high walls by them. So, recently, with Google's floundering a bit in the AI thing, Mark Zuckerberg is reportedly making direct calls to named researchers in DeepMind to poach them.
I wonder how those calls would go, right?
Well, whatever you're getting, I'll double it or whatever. But beyond that also, there's also this whole thing about the open source movement and a lot of tech people wanting to join that. Maybe Karpathy also might end up going there to the open source, not Meta, but to the open source movement. And then the other anecdotal stories about how when Google guy was actually leaving, not to go to Meta, but to OpenAI, Sergey Brin called him up and told him whatever, and basically gave him a blank check to stay. So, well, if you're one of those 100 guys, you're very lucky. It's the right time for you to make a lot of money at this point of time.
Right. And I think there's doubling down on this whole talent issue. What do you see? What are the opportunities you see for Indian tech guys in India and entrepreneurs? Because obviously, when it comes to the whole sheer compute power of building a foundational model of that sort, I mean, Valley is way ahead of the rest of the world, right? And maybe a few more spots here and there. But what do you think is happening? And of course, there's been some play with our, Indian LLMs also, right? What is your observation in that area?
Well, I won't have a very patriotic answer to this, to be very honest with you.
I think that's what we're looking for. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And again, it depends on Indians in India versus Indians outside India, the old story.
Right.
I mean,
we're talking about Indians in India. I think let's look at that because.
Sure. Interestingly, 3 or 4 of the people who wrote the Attention Is All You Need paper, which started off everything, have Indian descent. So I think there's perplexity is guys of Indian descent, etc. So Indians outside, the world's your oyster.
Absolutely.
Because all the other issues are there. I think here, my fear is that we are not equipped enough or have the mindset or the resources to do real deep tech in this space. There are some promising signs. I especially like what the Sarvam guys are doing with their models. But Sarvam has been, for example, capitalized with $40 million. Okay, which is a lot of money for a seed round in India or a Series A seed round, whatever you call it, in India. I mean, unheard of for $40 million round. Okay, at that level. But $40 million does nothing. In this space, okay, not even you're not sitting at the table. You're not table stakes. Also, you need hundreds of millions, okay, to start with. And so I think because of all those reasons, I do not think personally. I would love to be proved wrong, but I do not think personally that there's going to be that kind of deep tech building here that is happening in 2 or 3 other countries, where we will obviously. I think where India will find a niche is in the application space.
That's
okay. Right. In the fine-tuning of models for local context, etc., which doesn't require that much, the inferencing part, which doesn't require that much compute, etc., and that level of talent. But I think if you're one of those 100 guys, you will not be sitting here.
Yeah, very true. And I think that's a straight answer. It reminds me of when Sam Altman was visiting India, and I think Rajan Anand of Peak 15 asked him this question, right? That what do you think about somebody in India building a foundational model like yours, but let's say a $10 million check? And Sam, gave at that time a very straight answer. Said, look, I would say, don't even waste your time, right? He got a little panned by it because obviously people like politically correct answers, but that's the truth, right? We are talking about billions of dollars being spent at this point in time, right? No, let's hope that something happens. I think even if you were to go back 40 years back, even getting a basic computer out here was a big issue, right? And in India, it was. So, at some point, the whole playing field kind of got level. And then, of course, India emerged really strong. But still, India has really not been in the game of OS. It's always been on the application side, right? Any parting thoughts? I think it's been a fantastic conversation again with you, Jasprit. But, any parting thoughts about the future, the ethical considerations, or what has been the most unexpected or the most surprising built out that you've seen happening in AI out here, in the generative robot space?
Every morning it's something unexpected or surprising, and very honestly. Okay.
Very true.
So it's difficult to frankly single out one. Today, I was on a Zoom call with someone who said, Jasprit, I have a selfish question to ask you. because I cannot do this. How do you manage to keep up with everything? And I'm like, I can't. Okay, because there's so much exciting stuff. So we're living in very exciting times. There's like 100 exciting things happening almost on a weekly basis.
Right.
So it'd be very difficult for me to pick up one. But personal excitement, which has happened to me, and we're not going to, let's leave that as a teaser for the audience for a later talk, is that a particular AI hardware called a Rabbit R1, which probably think of it as the first smartphone of the post-smartphone era, first agent-based smartphone. So I got a mail. I had ordered it on the first day that it came out. And I've just got a mail that while it's been delayed a little bit, they'll start shipping soon. And I think that is the real hardware revolution beyond robotics, which I think we should talk about one day.
Yeah, I think the AI pins, I mean, of course, some people have been disappointed by the demos, but some of them have been, very, very fascinating. And I think that can itself be a very interesting topic for one of our.
It doesn't matter. Rabbit might fail. AI pin also fail. That's not the point. The point is that these things have started happening. They've started coming.
Very true. No, so I think on that note, Jaspreet, I think thanks again. This was a fantastic 40-50 minutes spent with you. Really opened up my thoughts on the development that's happening. And I'm sure the viewers out here would have really, really enjoyed this thing. So till we meet next time, have a good week.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, and great to have this chat again. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.